After such a strong start with both series, which one had the better follow-up? Today, we're talking about Ratchet Clank Going Commando and JAT 2. I never owned any of these games and only played bits and pieces of these games at a friend's house. So, let's take a deeper dive on them. We will look at each game individually, compare them to the predecessors, and finally, pit them against each other. Which game is better? Let's start off with Ratchet Clank Going Commando, unless you're from Europe, where it's called Lock and Loaded, since fun is illegal over there. The game starts a couple of months after the last game, with our heroes enjoying the fame, but Ratchet is getting a little bored of the peaceful life. Out of nowhere, they're teleported by Abercrombie Fizz Widget. He is tasking our duo to recover a lab experiment that was taken, and Ratchet accepts, while Clank is bribed by not needing to be part of the mission and given a cushy job. Life goals right there. Ratchet takes off on his new mission, where he meets new and even old characters. The interaction and the small information they have are great. Its humor is better than the last game, and I think my favorite interaction in this game is of course with the plumber guy. He does a bit of fourth wall breaking by saying he'll see Ratchet & Clank again in a couple of years, specifically telling you, the player, to expect another sequel of the game soon. One thing they changed was Ratchet's voice, and I think this one suits him better than the older one.
Well, as you can imagine, we've been pretty busy. After Drek's defeat, there were...
Now, let's talk about the gameplay. It's very similar to the previous game by being a third-person shooter with some light platforming. Ratchet had all the same moves in the last game, except you play a few levels without Clank at the beginning. I feel like these levels do give me an appreciation of what Clank brings to the table. The only move they did not bring back was the air long jump, but I don't think it made any difference for me. They did add one move you can do, and it's probably the most important one: strafing. This was my number one complaint about the first game. And finally, we can lock onto one direction while shooting. This to me makes the biggest difference and makes many other weapons easy to use, and while that is the only control change they made, they did change other game mechanics. One change they made is that the weapons now level up as you use them. I really like this because it gives you a reason to defeat enemies besides just being obstacles, and to level up different weapons. Another reason that made me switch over to use other weapons was the weapon have a level cap. Once I maxed out a weapon level, I could not upgrade it until I had the funds. So instead, I used a gun that I could level up even if the weapon wasn't great. Although the weapon was not the best, the upgraded version could be 10 times better. Wanting to know what the gun would do now that it's upgraded is an incentive to try and level up the gun. I always felt I had to use for the other weapons to maximize my leveling. I like seeing the numbers and bar go up, and this game definitely delivers on that itch. Even if you max out your weapon, you still get progression, but instead with your health. In this game, for every enemy you defeat, you gain experience to level up your health. Once the experience bar fills up, you'll be giving more health. So even if you die and have to start a section over, there is still some progression happening by leveling up your health or the guns you have. I died more in this game than I did in the previous game, and it's because the enemies are more aggressive and difficult. I think they did this because of the health level up and the strafing. In the previous game, any hit would take away 1 hit point, but that would not fly here because of the number of hit points you can have. Since you had more health and it was easier to use weapons, the game had to make the enemies more difficult, or the game would be a breeze. However, some enemies feel cheap with how much damage they do or how they ambush you. New changes also came to the minigames. The gadget to open the door has 2 new ones. Don't think they're better or worse than the last one in this game, but it is different. One of the other minigames is the hover bike races. Replacing the hoverboard races, here you race in bikes. You can pick up boost along the race, stack up the 3 with boost pads, obstacles, and even weapons to pick up in the ground like in Mario Kart. And just like Mario Kart, it has a lot of rubber banding with enemies always catching up to you if you're not constantly using boost or an item to store them. Airship battles are back and it's expanded in this game. There are 2 levels dedicated to it and they have missions you can do. They even let you upgrade a ship, and it felt mandatory to upgrade it to finish a specific mission. It used its own currency that you can get through playing the missions, so you had to replay them to level up your ship. It's a bit of an odd mode for me since it never felt like I was doing flying dogfights. I usually let the enemies pass me by or get in front of me since trying to follow them was tough. The best new addition, which is not a minigame but a mode, is the arena. Here you complete challenges like defeating a boss or a certain round of enemies. As you complete challenges, new ones appear that are more difficult or add a restriction. This is the best addition to this game for me. Just blasting wave after wave of enemies using your favorite or best guns. Speaking of weapons, there is a set of new weapons in the game. I think they did a great job in having more fun and interesting weapons than they did in the first game. They had the stable blaster, grenade and rocket launchers that you expect in games like this. But they have this homing disc weapon, a remote controlled spider, and even a long range sniper, which seems like a basic weapon they would put in the first game. You can even buy some of the weapons from the last game, but since I had a save file from the previous game, I get them for free. It's pretty cool how the game is rewarding the player for playing their previous game, and it does not even exclude new players of the series from getting those guns. Sadly, the other guns don't level up through experience, so I never felt like using them when I could be leveling up another gun. My favorite weapons are usually the explosive or defensive ones in many games. I just love throwing the turrets on the ground and little guys floating around me shooting at enemies as I just watch the chaos unfold. They still have the quick select wheel in this game where you can only select 8 weapons on the fly. One thing they did that I do like is that the game will pause while you're in the quick select menu. It's a small thing that just helps the gameplay experience for me. Like, they also automatically give you the max amount of ammo when you're buying it instead of having to scroll up. One thing that wasn't given this quality of life upgrade was the gadgets. There are a couple of new ones, but they still make you go into the menu to select the one you need, except for the hacking minigame one. Not sure why they did it for one of them, but not the rest. The gadgets, just like the last game, are used for solving small puzzles or for an interesting platforming section in the level. Levels are similar to the previous game, and there's no reason to mess with what worked well. They are linear levels with branching paths that lead back to where you were to cut down on backtracking. I think the most interesting stage for me was the one where you're on a small planet. It's not something they've done before and has this cool zoom out effect. Besides that, the only other thing that stood out to me is that you can hit these slot machines in the stage, and they work, costing you 10 bolts per hit. If you ever feel gypped, you can always just blow up the machine. There are even new platforms or playstyles in the game. You get this other jetpack power up from your residential sketchy guy, of course, that will let you fly for a limited time, or a gliding section where you traverse through obstacles without stopping. Even the slingshot got a bit of an upgrade of just not being able to pull you to a swing, but you could pull certain objects towards you. It's pretty cool to see them do new things with the previous game's gadgets. But one other thing they took from the old game was the plot as well. What I mean by this is that the story is about getting this experiment back that was stolen, but you later realize there's more to this little Furby than meets the eye. It seems that Abercrombie was planning on cloning this adorable little creature to sell to people as pets, but they are very hostile. The person who stole the original creature was a scientist working on a vaccine that calmed them down, but was stopped by Abercrombie. They kind of remind me of the Twonkies from Jimmy Neutron. Now, why would the head of the company want to stop someone from making the product they are selling safe? Besides profit, of course. Well, this whole time, the real Abercrombie was held hostage and impersonated by Captain Quark. He wanted to create a crisis where he could blame it on Ratchet Clank while fixing it and becoming a hero again. It's similar to the last game in that he is the villain because he wants to be the center of attention again and be known as a hero. In the end, he is swallowed by a mutated pet and then needs to be rescued by Ratchet and Clank. This is, however, not the end for the player because we still have New Game Plus. So just like the last game, you want to go into it to get more bolts. But they made it even easier here with a multiplier. The way this game multiplier works is that the more you kill, the higher your multiplier will go until you max out at 20, but will go back to 1 if you get hit. So you'll be able to get 20 times more bolts, making it easier to get all those sweet upgrades and the awesome weapon we all know, the Rhino. To be specific, we get the sequel, the Rhino 2, and this gun is different from the last game in that it shoots high-powered missiles like a machine gun, letting you breeze through the game. However, they do have another big gun called the Zodiac. This one destroys everything in a big flash. On top of that, there are other things you can do in New Game Plus, like upgrading your armor, your spaceship, or getting these skill points. Skill points were in the last game, and they're like treasure hunts where you have to do something with a small hint. Once you collect enough skill points, you get these things you get from cheat codes basically, like big head mode or extra goodies. Some of the unlocks are a bit odd, like a 2-player ship minigame, but my favorite one by far was being able to play the game in first person. It was so much fun playing this game in this mode, and it made some of the platforming really interesting to do, but harder as it was not meant to be played this way. They even changed the controls a bit to allow it to be playable better in this mode. I have to say, after playing this game, I think this game is really good and is definitely an improvement of the first game. They took a lot of the things that worked in the first game and expanded them in different ways. On top of that, it feels like they were experimenting with different mechanics by having many new but small changes. I think just having strafing makes this game much better, but it has a lot more that makes it superior to the last game. Let's now talk about the more interesting sequel, Jak 2. The game starts with Jak and friends trying to get this device to work, and they're stuck into the portal it created. He is separated from everyone else and then captured. We skip to 2 years into the future, where we see Jak being experimented on, with dark eco being pumped into his body. After our villains leave, we see Daxter come out and try to rescue Jak, but he is able to break free with the power of the dark eco. However, I think the bigger shock to fans of the series is that Jak can now talk.
Say something! Just this once! I'm gonna kill Praxis!
Can't believe those were Jak's first words. They grew up so fast. Well, that's a small silver lining after being tortured for 2 years. We are let out and we now start our revenge story. This game's story has a lot more going on compared to the first one, mostly because our main character can now talk and there are a lot more characters to interact with. They definitely went for a more mature audience. And I will talk more about this game's story later on, but before that, let's look into the gameplay. Gameplay wise, the game is very similar at the beginning to the previous game. Jak has all the same moves he had in the first game, and instead of using good ecos as power-ups, our edgy new Jak now uses the power of dark eco. You can go crazy punching your enemies and making it easier to kill them. Kinda reminds me of that Sonic werewolf form. Besides that, there isn't much difference until they give our boy the one thing that every edgy character needs: a gun. The gun definitely makes the combat much more fun than the first game. As you progress, you will have a total of 4 guns, with each one being more powerful but having different use cases. The shotgun is good for taking care of hordes of enemies, while the sniper can take care of single enemies from far away. However, the guns do have one issue, and it's the same complaint I had with Ratchet Clank 1. You can't strafe, so you're freestyle aiming in this game. Since I could not strafe, I could not aim or dodge, so most of the time I was shooting enemies from far away with the sniper, especially since they give you a laser pointer for aiming and some auto locking if you're aiming towards the enemies. One thing that seems completely irrelevant now is melee combat. It becomes more of a defensive or last resort type thing if you run out of ammo, which I never did. I didn't even use the werewolf form, mostly because of that dilemma where you don't want to use precious resource throughout the whole game and then never use it. It looks like they try to combine the melee and combat, since you're able to punch and immediately do a 3-shot with the weapon you have. I like the idea of combining them. The issue is that this is the only move where you combine both. In the end, the combat in this game is a lot better than the first game. While the combat is an improvement, what about the level design? That was my favorite thing about the last game. Platforming challenges from the last game are still here, and this game delivers on that front. Since there are a lot more linear levels in this game, they can direct or control the urgency of each platform sections, and it feels like you're almost making every jump. This added to the difficulty of the game, which I liked. I just wish that there were more checkpoints in the game with how difficult some parts could get. Dying and having to redo sections in this game is terrible. Specifically, with some of these sections are scripted and you have to go with the game's timing. On top of that, any ammo you have used before is now replenished, making it even harder. Enemies that will most likely kill you will be these things called the metalheads. They are integral to the story, but before that, I want to talk about these yellow stones they drop. When you kill a metalhead, they drop these orbs and it gives you a reason to defeat them. However, if you die and you already collected the orb, they spawn back but without the orbs. This just adds to the frustration of having to redo a section, but it was probably done so you can't farm these orbs. They are actually used to power up your edgy mode by giving you new moves to use in that form. You actually get power ups from one of these statues from the first game in its home. I'm also surprised that a statue has a home. But what is more surprising is that this game has an overworld. This overworld is one of the more frustrating aspects and probably worst part of this game. Usually when a mission appears, you have to travel to that spot to take it. Then after you see the cutscene, they send you somewhere else where you have to do the mission. This gets annoying when the mission you get are not very long and it takes you just as much time to travel to the mission to complete them. The reason it even takes a long time to travel is because of the layout. Since the world is too big to walk around, you have to use vehicles and take them from random people like in GTA. They are very floaty and are hard to handle at high speeds, especially when a lot of the world is these corridors. So you're trying to get around this map in these cramped narrow streets with a bunch of other vehicles in the way with floaty controls. There is this mechanic that allows you to either be in traffic on top or with the pedestrians at the bottom. If you're in traffic, it's a smooth ride, but you have to constantly dodge around other vehicles. At the pedestrian level, it's a bit bumpy, but you can just run over people without any issues besides the police patrol. Each side has their benefits and you can change lanes whenever you want. So I was constantly trying to go up and down trying to avoid cars and policemen. It gets tiring when all you want to do is get to the next mission. They at least have a mini map you can use so you don't have to guess where you have to go, and it works as a GPS. It knows each turn you should do to get to the next mission, and it knows this because every section of the map has a few entrances. So there are only 1 or 2 ways to get to that destination fast. With so many curved small lanes, most of these sections feel like those mazes in the back of cereal boxes. They do add some side missions you can do from the overworld, like finding specific spots in the map to get precursor orbs or collecting items within a certain amount of time. These missions are okay, but not being a fan of traversing the map does hinder the enjoyment of doing them, that I just skipped over them. You usually do them for the precursor orbs, which there are a lot less compared to the previous game, and they work kind of like the skill points in Ratchet Clank, unlocking cheat codes. Even with all that frustration, this overworld was cool since it does give the vibe of what they're going for. And what they're going for is a dystopian future. Yes, that portal we took in the beginning sent our friends into the future, and as you play through the game, you can see how the city is divided by class. Here the people have taken the evil dark eco from the first game and are using it to power the city. This caused the Metalheads, an ancient race, to resurface and attack the city since they thrive on the dark eco. Praxis, the leader of the city who rules with an iron fist, is trying to find a way to both fight against the Metalheads and keep control of the city under any means necessary. To do this, he bribes the Metalheads to attack the city walls, but not penetrate it so that he can keep the city scared under his control, but also buy time to find a way to defeat the Metalheads himself. You can even hear Praxis make some announcements in the city to show the level of control he has over everyone.
This is your burial.
On our hero side, Jack is doing whatever he can to get at Praxis for torturing him, so he joins an underground group trying to get rid of him. They also have the solution to getting rid of the Metalheads, and that is with this mute boy. In the end, we find out that the mute boy is actually Jack. He came from the future and hid in the past since he was too young to fight. Here, he is strong enough to defeat the Metalhead and is trying to get himself to go to the past so that he could travel into the future to defeat the Metalheads, which is what he is doing now. It's very confusing and deals with the whole time paradoxes and stories. Feels like they tried to build this completely different story by using elements and beats of the last game, and it's not bad in my opinion. In the end, I do like this game and it does a lot of things better than the first game with its combat and story. Those elements were lacking in the previous title and not the main reason I liked the last game, but it does make for a good game. Do I think this game is better than Jak 1? It's a bit hard to judge with how different the games feel, but I did have more fun in this game than the last one. So, which of these two games did I prefer? After playing them both, I enjoyed my experience with Ratchet Clank going Commando compared to Jak 2. I think the biggest reason is mostly the pacing with the back and forth between missions, which took up time to do. Gunplay is also fun in Jak 2, but it feels more like Ratchet Clank 1, which going Commando has made better with strafing. I do think that Jak 2 does have better platforming and story than going Commando, with the story being a lot more interesting and the platforming being more challenging. So, which of these two games do you prefer? Let me know in the comments down below, and as always my lovely patience, thank you so much for watching, and tune in next time. Bye.